over and you're just doing maintenance. You just click on the D7 Auto button, and as each application executes, or in the D7 Auto sequence, the application is downloaded on the fly. So if you don't use an app, it's not downloaded, and you don't waste time transferring it to the customer's computer.
Yeah, that's nice. How large is D7 itself before you did anything?
D7 itself, yeah, it's about 7.5 meg, something like that. It's not too bad.
Oh,
Um, I actually have now D7 does come with some dependencies, and there are a lot of things that kind of I bundle with D7. And that's another long story. For example, malware scan definitions, and I'll have to get back to that. But there are a number of things that I do bundle with D7 that if you didn't want to transfer over all of this stuff, I've actually also created another utility called App Launcher, which allows you to download D7 itself on the fly and any other tools that you use on the fly. So you can transfer App Launcher to a remote computer. And that's about, I think that's like something like 427K.
hmm. You
So,
download that on the remote and just let everything download from their side.
yeah.
That's nice. Can you change the orders in which things run? Like, say, if you hit the auto
Only if you
on.
email me and ask really nicely.
Okay, all right. I didn't know
And no, it is important. I've had like for example, of all of the things that you can do on the maintenance tab, I had a lot of things that required some sort of user intervention. For example, the check desktop and start menu shortcuts for broken shortcuts. That required user intervention as part of the maintenance routine because you have to manually look through and say, okay, these shortcuts are broken. I'm going to delete them. I wanted that to be a manual thing because I don't want to accidentally and automatically delete something that shouldn't be. For example, a disconnected map network drive
that.
is a prime example of something that would turn up broken when it's really not. It's just a computer in your shop. It's not connected to the network that it's supposed to be. So what I had, I have suggestions from people all of the time, and they say, well, why don't you put everything manual first, and why don't you put this before this and this before this? And I follow those suggestions, and I do it for the people that ask. So while you can't actually change the order yourself, like I said, send me an email and ask real nice, and I might do it for you.
That's cool. Yeah. Do you have any idea what your user base is?
No clue.
Yeah, funny.
I'm steadily approaching 100,000 downloads on like Major Geeks and Download.com together, but I have no idea what percentage of that are actual computer techs, not just people looking for some miracle cure to their problem, regular end user. I really don't know what the user base is.
Okay. So for yourself, do like okay, let me go back a little bit. You say you're a bench tech. Do you own your own shop or do you work for somebody else doing that?
Well, I started out with my own business. I left that. I worked for someone. I worked for someone else. I worked for someone else, and that trend continued. And now I actually work for, excuse me, the Outer Banks Hotline, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to the survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault.
Hmm.
And what I do there is, I mean, I wear many hats. I'm art technical. I'm writing a database for them. That's a learning experience for me because, as I said, I am just a bench tech. I'm not really a programmer, but that's a learning experience for me. They're patient. They're willing to let me do that. In my spare time, I do run Computer Guy IT Solutions, which is just my part-time run it out of the garage business here at home. And well, No, then my other spare time, I program on D7.
Yeah, there's a lot of our listeners are out of the garage techs, me included, that just, well, I just got a shop, but it's kind of the way we all start out on our own. And it's nice to have a tool like this, to help us, who don't know how to maybe write batch files and make a string of programs run in a row like that. A lot of us don't know that stuff. Now, for yourself, would you use D7 in auto on every computer? Is there certain ones that would spark your interest to use like the full auto on certain problems?
I use D7 on every computer. I'll be honest, it's the first thing I do. I look for before I even start to diagnose the computer, I start D7 essentially. I want to see all of the information on the information tab. I want to be able to, for example, on the info tab, it also displays if there are any mini dumps. You click on the label for mini dumps and it brings up Nearsoft's blue screen view to analyze the dump for you. So I want to be able to do that. So I do that first thing on every system. As far as any systems that I would use auto in particular for, pretty much all of them. I use the D7 auto mode because, of course, I have the registered version. So I use that on pretty much all systems. Of course, if it's in for malware removal, the first thing I do is hit the malware tab and I hit D7 auto. And when I'm done with it, of course, I go back to the maintenance tab and I hit D7 auto. So it's pretty much my process for working on a system.
That's cool. Now, you said you want to get back to the malware scan definitions. Also, would you want to go over what malware scanners are included with it?
Oh, yeah. And that's well, as far as what malware scanners are included now, there's 2 points to that question. The first one, what I was referring to was D7's malware scan, which now I've actually made into a separate application, but it's still part of D7.
Oh,
Malware scan is my there are actually two components to it. There's pre-malware scan and there's malware scan. And I'll start with malware scan, even if that sounds a little backwards. Malware scan is sort of like a hijack this or auto runs. It displays, various points in the registry for malware to hide. What's unique about this that you don't find in auto runs and hijack this is you have the ability to both whitelist and blacklist items that you find. So, for example, if you're looking through the services or the run keys or what have you, you see a known good item and you know that that item is good, you can whitelist it so that on the next computer that you're working on, you'll never see that item again.
oh, that's
And
cool.
yeah, and
Awesome.
you blacklist it and it's automatically deleted by the pre-malware scan before you even get to the malware scan
Oh, that's awesome too.
interface.
Neat.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something that I really was excited about doing, and that's one of the things that I did actually in batch files before. Of course, it is dependent on file name. So basically, in these days when everything has a random file name, blacklisting an item is sort of pointless, but it's still pretty good for the common adware and spyware that installs with a certain program and puts itself in program files or whatever. There's actually a file system component to D7. The component itself is called file handler, but you'll never need to know that. When you start D7, it puts a lot of context menus in the right-click menu for Explorer. So if you right-click on a file or a directory, you have a lot of options that D7 has placed there. And of course, these are removed when you shut down D7.
Hmm.
But one of the things that you can do with the right click option is you can blacklist a file or directory to be deleted by malware scan. So one thing it's still barely useful for is a lot of that common adware and spyware that you want to delete. It's not a harm, it's not malware, but usually they have static file names, so you can blacklist those items and have that taken care of by the pre-malware scan.
That's neat, man. That's very awesome. Hey, now you said the malware scan, you're releasing that as a separate thing on its own. Is that got a name and a place for that too?
Well, it's just called malware scan, and I haven't really released it on its own.
Oh, okay.
But I did make it a separate executable recently, because I know sometimes I just want to use malware scan. I don't want to wait for D7 to load. With all of the information gathering that D7 does, it tends to be slow to start up sometimes. And if I'm in a hurry, I just want to use malware scanner if I'm just trying to check something out. So that's why I made that a separate executable.
Okay. That's neat. Now, did you want to go into some of the programs that are included for malware scanning and such?
Sure. Well, I'll talk first about some more of the processes that D7 does.
Sure.
I have several sections on my malware tab, and the first section is pre-removal. And the first thing I'll talk about is the IFEO modifier, and that's if you know, that's image file execution options, which is a certain area of the registry that's intended for a debugger to be attached to a program. It's a programming thing that I myself don't even understand yet, but it's used by malware a lot of times to hijack executables. So, for example, if you run Notepad, it instead runs this other malicious executable or regedit or what have you. In fact, everyone's familiar with sysinternal's Process Explorer.
Mhm.
And Process Explorer has a function that replaces Task Manager with Process Explorer. And that is done by creating an IFEO. So what I have first in my lineup is the IFEO modifier. And the point is not to see necessarily what malware is hijacking another file, although that can be useful. The point is actually to hijack the malware. For example, if you have a malicious executable running on a system that you can't terminate or continues to respawn itself, you can add that as an IFEO in my IFEO modifier, and it can no longer respawn itself. All you need to do is restart the computer or kill the process if you can, and instead of that malicious executable running again, nothing will run. Or my dummy executable, which you can install. But that's pretty neat because it's come in handy with some of the earlier variants of Zero Access, which had an executable that would prevent you from removing the file system hidden beneath a NTFS junction point. And the executable would just prevent you from removing that file system. Essentially, you would create an IFEO for that executable name, restart the computer, and then you could then delete the file system and then go back and delete that executable and do it without a hassle, essentially. But I have a whole page on IFEO modifier if anyone's a little more interested in that explanation for that. Moving on, I have Kill 'Em All, which is sort of like there's another program out there that does the same thing.
Things like rkill.
Yes,
That's
that's
similar.
it. Yeah, similar. Kill 'Em All does that. Of course, Kill 'Em All, you can actually create a whitelist, so you don't need so Kill 'Em All won't terminate certain processes. It's very useful when you're working remotely because you don't want TeamViewer.exe being terminated, for example. Then moving down the line, a couple other